Hi everyone, it's Maddie Brady. We're here to get real about mental health. Stay tuned for some great conversations with some very special guests. Hey everyone, welcome to Get Real. We are here with Brooklyn.
Hi everyone.
Thank you for coming. You flew here from Minnesota.
Yes. Yeah, totally. Like I was like, I have to come, obviously, to see you and just like be in New York, but then just an opportunity to like share the journey of sobriety, I feel like is such a gift, and like the purpose of getting sober. So
Yes.
It was an honor. Thank you for having me.
Of course, you're our first fly-in guest.
Beautiful.
So hopefully you're inspiring some others out there.
Yeah, everybody just get on a plane. It's now spring in New York, so
Yes.
like do it up.
Yes, we had fun last night. So I would love to just dive right into it because I know you have a really unique getting sober story. And I was kind of there for the beginning of the night, and I don't really know what happened to this day. Like I knew that after that night you got sober, but I have no idea what happens, and I saved it for right now.
For this moment.
So
Yeah.
what happens that night?
Yeah, I think it's so funny because like that statement is super common for a couple people who were like in that night. Like it was literally like I was deep in a dressed up addiction, and then I was like completely out of it. Like all of a sudden I was like sitting in detox. And the way that I like share my story today when I like talk to new people about it is like I literally tried to jump off a bridge and I landed in detox. Like I was in Ocean City and I like tried to jump off the 9th Street Bridge, and I ended up like having a crazy like spiritual experience, and like, you know, I was on like drugs and drinking, and so there was a lot going on in my head, obviously. And just like I remember that was Labor Day weekend, so I got sober September 6th 2020, and I remember when Memorial Day weekend was there and we like had, you know, just like a classic like party for like
Yes.
start of summer, whatever. And I remember like having that conscious thought of like, I want to be dead before Labor Day. And if I'm not dead before Labor Day, I want to be dead before my birthday, which was January 2nd. And so it was just like, I had this thing where I was in like so much pain. And I thought that the only way out, like drugs and alcohol were really good for a while. Mm-hmm. And then it was like, those aren't working. So maybe I just need to like get out of here. Like I just like had this almost like obsession with just dying and having that like release of the pain, because there was so much pain. And so I ended up like in that experience on the bridge, and I was like, this is it, it's done. And then like literally next thing I know, I'm like on the phone with detox. They were like, where are you? Don't move, like we're gonna come get you. It was like the middle of the night, like literally like 2, 3, 4 a.m., like somewhere in there. And they like came and picked me up. You were on that jitney. Like I had fallen off that jitney that night. So I still to this day have like a gnarly scar
I remember
on
that.
my knee.
I remember you falling.
Yeah, I like totally like was literally ended up in detox. Didn't have my shoes on. Was like bleeding, was like crying, was so puffy, like just in this like tight little red dress. Like it was such a picture. And I was just a mess. And I get into detox, and I remember waking up the next day and like, right, there are like 2 people who know where I am. Mm-hmm. Like there were only a couple of people who like knew that I was in detox. I had to like make a couple phone calls that morning, but it was the first time that I was like, oh my God, I'm going to be okay. Oh my gosh.
Wow.
Like this is the beginning. Like I actually felt the freedom and the peace that I was chasing for so long. And I was like less than 24 hours sober, but I just knew I was like, there was like something that changed like in my head, in my spirit, that was like, I'm going to be sober. Like I'm good. I'm good. And that was like the start of the journey. And I'm sitting in detox, and nobody knew that I went to detox. Like I didn't plan on going to detox. Like what I found out later is that like a lot of people plan to go to detox. Like that there's a lot of people that are like, oh, I'm going to go to detox, or I'm going to go to treatment in like a few days or whatever. So they like prepare and you like pack a bag. I like did not do that. And I remember being like
drastically different.
What am I going to do? Like they gave me scrubs the first night, and they were like, hey, you're going to need like your friends or family to come bring you clothes. And in that moment, like that was that was when I started to really feel like alone, and I knew my life was going to change, because it took my friends like 3 or 4 days to bring me clothes to detox. Like I was in detox like 15 minutes away from where I lived, and like nobody brought me anything.
God.
And I was like, I am alone in this universe. Like this is, and it was just like kind of back to that like fear feeling of like, okay, like I don't know what I'm going to do next, but it has to be different than this. And so that was like the start of my sober journey. And then I like was in detox for like 6 or 7 days. Like I was in detox for a long time, which is like not normal, but I was so scared to like go back to the outside that eventually, obviously there was like a plan put in place of like, hey, you're gonna like get out of detox, you're gonna go home, pack a bag, and then you're gonna go back to Minnesota, which was where my family was. And I was like, okay, like I'm gonna do that. And so that was what happened. And then that is like kind of what propelled me into the life that I'm living today.
That is insane. That is so crazy. And just to set the scene a little bit, like I knew you, but we would be at the same parties and stuff, but we didn't really know each other. Right. And it goes to show you, like, in that party mentality, how many people are truly suffering, because like I would have never known that you were like that. I mean, again, we never had like a real conversation or anything like that, but I think a lot of people, like, you were having these huge parties all the time and everyone was going to them. And meanwhile, that was going on internally. That's like bone chilling, because I even remember that was my second summer that I was sober, and my last summer in Ocean City. And I remember like going to your party like 1 or 2 times and then realizing, I was like, there has to be something more than this, because I was 2 years sober and I still tried to go, you know, because I still was trying to like fit in and be around the same people and be with these people that I thought were my friends. Yeah. But I remember a distinct moment in your house where I was like, I am with 100 people. Like, it is packed wall to wall people, and I feel more alone than ever, because everyone was just like in this Gatsby mentality, just so much happening at one time, and I just felt like stuck. And that was ultimately, it's almost your parties and just a mixture of everything, obviously not just that, but that made me realize like I have to get somewhere else. I have to get beyond this, because I just felt like this is the same thing. This is the same as it's always been. But yeah, again, going back to I just had no idea that you felt like that. Zero clue. And I remember like you coming up to me and saying, oh, I have soda, or I have something. And again, we barely knew each other. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's so nice of her. And now to realize like that you were struggling during that too is just, I wish I could have been there for you, and I wish that things were different, but again, every single thing happens for a reason.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's so powerful is that like you had that experience in our house, like during those moments, and being like, we're here today. Like the fact that we are here today and we had all of those previous experiences, like I'm like, that is like so divinely orchestrated, where I'm like, there is something so much greater and so much more like purposeful, like between like our relationship and just like us as individuals, which I think is the real gift of like sobriety, is like once you get sober, you get to see all of that stuff for what it really is. And this is, I didn't know that you didn't know this, but now that we're talking about it, the reason I like remember being like, I need to have like Oli Pops or like whatever for Maddie when she comes, because I knew you were going to come, because prior to that summer, I had tried to get sober. Like I had tried, and like when I say tried, it's like very loosely tried, like, right? Like I was like, I know that I want to be sober. And I had that like moment of like surrender where I called a friend who I knew who had been sober for like 6 years or whatever, and I was like, I really need help, like I don't know what to do. And she was like, this is what you should do. And I tried to do those things kind of, but I just like wasn't ready. And those parties that like we had, I feel like were such a push in that direction where it was like me trying to be like, maybe this is the good life, like maybe like the party scene and all of these like friendships and whatever that I'm having, like maybe this is the route. And it just kept like pressing over and over and over again of like, this is not what you're supposed to be doing, this is not what you're supposed to be doing. And then it was like people like you, like sober women, were showing, I mean, not sober women, it was literally you were the only sober woman, the only one. But like you were showing up and I was like, okay, like I could do that. But then it was just like you stopped showing up because of like those moments where you're like, this is not serving me and the life that I want to live. And I think everybody like who gets sober starts to like pursue a different life. Like you eventually get to that point where like everything that I am doing is like no longer serving the life that I'm supposed to live. So like I'm doing a disservice, like not only to myself, but like other people who can like be helped and see a way out. And that's like the real purpose of sobriety. And so like you were that to me, which is like, I'm so grateful for you to be how you were in those moments, because it was the thing where it like gave me hope of like, oh, there's like somebody who's the same age as me and she like looks happy, like, and everything looks good. And I was the opposite, where like everything looked really good. Like it looked like I had the business, it looked like I had the boyfriend, I had the car, I had the like house, like I had the long like laundry list of things that I like had, but there was literally nothing. Like it was completely empty and broken.
Yeah. That, unfortunately, is normally how it goes. But that means so much to me to hear you saying that, because it really shows that there is a purpose behind all of our actions. And it wasn't like at first when I was going to your house, I got to see people I hadn't seen in a while. So it was nice. And it wasn't that I wasn't having fun. It was fun for a minute. But when you're sober, how long do you want to stay?
Right.
In an environment like that, you know, you say your hellos, you catch up with a couple of people, and then it's like, okay, why am I here?
I mean, it's like that quote that people talk about where they're like, you can't heal in the environment that made you sick.
Yeah,
and it's
exactly. And that's why it meant so much for me. Like nowadays, people do that stuff for me all the time. Like, oh, here's non-alcoholic options and all of that. But back then, I still had a bit of insecurity about my sobriety because nobody really did get it. So a couple times even that summer, someone one-on-one would be like, how do you do it? Like, it's really, and they would show interest, and I was like, oh my gosh, what? Like, you think this is cool? You have interest in this? And I had never really gotten that before. But then I did go back. I remember, I believe you personally texted me about your jitney for that night, and I came with a couple friends. And I remember, like, again, we weren't really close, so I was hanging out with my girlfriends, and then everything was going on at one time. And I do remember that you had a bloody knee, and then I remember you got in an Uber, I believe, from the point, and I heard that you Ubered yourself to detox. So obviously that is not the story, but that's the only thing I ever heard. And then I think I reached out pretty quickly and was needed to let you know, like, everything was going to be okay, because I heard people talking about it, because people talk so much there, especially, but everywhere. And everyone was talking about it. I was like, I have to make sure that you're okay. And then that's really how our friendship formulated, because prior to that it was just like, oh, we see each other, we say hello, and that was it.
It was like super low depth. And I remember when I left detox, like I didn't have my phone the entire time, and I was in the car, like they were driving people like to the sober house or whatever, and then they were gonna drop me off, and I like turned my phone on for the first time, and I was so scared of like what is gonna happen. And it was like there was one text from someone that was like, what the fuck? And then like the other text was from you, and it was like, I don't remember what it said, but I remember just like crying and being like, okay, it's all fine.
Oh my gosh. See, like, and you really don't realize what an impact you can make on people, which I think is the phenomenal part, because like the people that helped me, I just feel so indebted to them internally. Like they literally saved my life. They saved my life. And even if I don't see them every day or have a relationship like that with them, it's like there's a handful of people that I'm just so internally grateful for, to a point beyond even describing, because it's like little, when you're in that state, little teeny things mean the entire world.
Yeah.
And it really can impact you because you're so broken and you're so afraid and confused and lost. And to have just little teeny things or little acts of kindness just completely change your perspective and realize, okay, this girl did it, I can do that. And that's what I had as well. Luckily there was one other girl that was very similar to me, and she helped me, and that showed me like, she's doing it, I can do it. Yeah. Because where we were doing it, not a lot of people were. It was very little.
No, it was like not common, and I'm sure you've experienced this like as you're getting more into the like sober network and whatever, but I feel like a couple of years ago, like 3 years ago, even like 2 years ago, like getting sober was not the thing to do. Like,
no.
It was weird, it was beyond, it was like, oh, you definitely have a problem. Whereas like now today, it's like, yeah, like there's people who have a problem with drinking and have a bad relationship with it and all of that stuff, or like are operating under a compulsion, and like, you know, there's all of that. But then there's people who are like, it just like doesn't work for me anymore, and I'm gonna stop. And it's been really interesting to like watch how the world has kind of like transformed around like sober events, sober activities, like sober bars, all of that stuff, like what we went to last night. Like, I think it's interesting to see that, but always remembering that it was like always the little interactions that I had with sober people who were like the things that absolutely changed the course of my life. Like people that I don't even talk to today, like what you're talking about. Like I think about how much gratitude I have for some of the nurses at that detox, because literally after like 2 days of me not having clothes, they brought me their own clothes, like from their houses. Like when they came back for their shifts, they were like, here, like I thought I was, you know, I'm like relatively the same size as you, so I like brought you some of this stuff, like sorry it's not like that cute or
That's
like whatever.
beautiful.
And I was like, oh my god, like
yeah,
people are so caring and loving and like like genuine to their core, especially people who are like in sobriety. It's like I just want, like what my experience was when I got sober was people were like, I'm only here so like you can have a better life. And I like didn't grasp that concept for a very long time. Like I was like, you're here so I can have a better life, I'm here so I can have a better life. Like that didn't make sense to me. Like I was so self-absorbed and just like thinking about what my outcome was going to be. And I feel like now as I've grown in sobriety, I've gotten to have that like change of heart, and I'm so grateful that I had so many people who said that stuff to me, who were like, no, I'm here for the next person, like I'm here for you. Like sure, my life has gotten better, but I'm here so like another like 19, 23-year-old whatever like doesn't have to die. Like so there's like one girl that doesn't have to like literally kill herself to like get sober. Like that's the real impact of getting sober, and like pushing forth like the message of just like life's a gift and you can like live in gratitude and in love with other people.
And the kindness that you can experience in sobriety, that's something I didn't know existed. Like in a world where there is so much happening and so much tumultuous problems and division, there is so much beauty in those small moments, and you really realize how amazing human beings can be. Like human beings can be really amazing, and you forget because of the go and the nonsense and the everyday, but people really care. People really care. And when what you were saying about giving it to the next person, when you have someone reach out and say that you helped them, that doesn't compare to any other feeling. It does not compare to anything that you can give yourself. And that's what I think is so amazing. Like even I didn't even know that I played an impact in you getting sober, and it's just something you can't even describe, knowing that you were able to just play a minute part in someone else experiencing the other side, because the other side is so amazing.
It's so much better. And like that's the true like piece of freedom, like when someone is like, you know, like this part of your story, or just like seeing you like living a normal life or a happy life or whatever, or just this like one way that you said that statement, like that impacted me and changed like the course of how I was living my life. It's like, oh my God, like that's it. Then that's the reason. Then like everything is perfect. And I'm so glad that it happened that way, because like that's happening for you. Like it's happening for you and for me. And I think there was always this like I lived in that constant state of like, oh, all this stuff is happening like to me. Like it's happening to me and it's affecting me, and it's life is so hard and life is so scary. Like I was so scared for so long of like literally everything. And I think the piece of like when you start to live a sober life and like a spiritual life and just like a life of like awareness and motivation and, you know, whatever you want to call it, just something that's different, like you start to be like, oh, I can like freely walk around and enjoy life and experience life in a way that is like super raw but super beautiful. Like there are things that are like, and you and I were talking about that I think last night, where it's like everybody talks about the chaos. Like everybody talks about like, this is like the mess that it was when I was drinking. And then everybody talks about like the really, really good, like this is how great and wonderful my life is today. But then there's like this piece in the middle where it's like really raw and really broken. But then there's like this weird spiral happening where it's also super beautiful and triumphant and like light.
Healing.
And you're like, that part, like that's the gift. Like that's the beautiful thing that you get to experience when you move in sobriety.
And really slowly putting the puzzle pieces back together again.
Yeah.
And just continuing to build on everything you do, because it isn't an overnight journey.
Right.
But going back to the start of your drinking, how do you think you got into your addiction?
Yeah, I mean, like, the way that I always think about it today, which I did not think about it this way when I was drinking, when I was growing up or anything, but the way that I look at it today is, like, I was so confused when I was a kid. Like, I grew up in a house that was, like, really confusing because we were the definition of, like, what you saw at those parties. Like, that was my life forever. It was, like, hi, here's, like, this really beautiful family, like, 2 kids, mom and dad, we like are all dressed up, we're going to all these events, like everything's like happy and good. But like what was happening inside was like, you know, like emotional and verbal abuse, and there was like a lot of alcoholism, there were like multiple affairs and like a lot of like questions. Like there was so much stuff that was like really confusing for a kid that was between the ages of like 6 and 13. Like that was a mess. And so I like, for me, it's like I got super confused as a young kid of like, I always thought that this was everyone's normal. Like I thought everyone was a faker. Like that was literally what I thought every person, every family, every relationship was like, it's just a facade. And so I got super confused of like, this doesn't make sense, because I would go to some of my friends' houses and like all of their families, some of their families were like super normal and healthy, and like everyone would sit down and like have a family dinner and all this stuff, and there wouldn't be like fighting or yelling or whatever. And I was like, oh, they're just like really good at faking it. And I was like, wow, they like really are putting on a good show. And then it would like kind of come out where it was like, oh no, that's just like how they are all the time. And so in that like confusion, I got like angry, right? Like any other kid, like I'm just like mad, because then I'm like, what the heck? Why is this my life? Like that was when I formed into that experience of like, this is happening to me, right? Like, and I started to get to that place where like, if you had parents like mine, you would want to escape too, you know, like really quick. Like a lot of my friends always talk about this of like, Brooklyn was in 3rd grade and she was like, I'm leaving. Like when I can leave, I'm leaving. And I was like so married to that. And it just was like anger and anger and anger. And it like kept going. And I could have every excuse under the sun. Like that was really what it came down to, is it was like, I could point out an affair. I could point out like abuse. I could point out like just like absolute chaos. I could point out like alcoholism, right? Like the amount of times that like I like got left at school and teachers would have to bring me home, or like my grandma or like my uncles would have to come pick me up. It was like I had a lot of evidence to be like, this is why I'm messed up.
Yeah.
Like it's everybody else's fault.
Mm-hmm. And that is really hard to make that transition where instead of using everything that happened to you growing up, you realize that, like, at the end of the day, we were talking about this last night, our parents didn't have a guidebook. They didn't have any experience in this, and things were so different back then. Yeah. People didn't have open conversations like this. This would be unheard of. This would be
my
banana
mother would be
land.
Mortified if she heard this podcast. My mother would be like, what?
Yeah, like this was not the norm. So like we both talked about our parents coming from traumatic childhoods, and then I'm sure their parents and their parents and so on, and then it just keeps going. Yeah. And realizing when you get to the other side that, like, our parents, at least for me, were like my age when they started having kids, you know? Yeah. And that they didn't really know what the heck was going on.
Yeah.
And then getting to the side of forgiveness, and then being able to forgive everything, forgive yourself, forgive everything that happens in your life, and realizing that nothing really happened to you and it wasn't about you. And I think that's detaching yourself from your ego and realizing that it wasn't about me.
Right.
Nothing, like, even if something was directly said to me, done to me, it wasn't about me. Like, it was past traumas that were undealt with.
Yeah.
And I think it's truly beautiful, forgiveness and getting to the other side and being able to build a completely different relationship and not holding on to that anymore. Because guess what? At the end of the day, holding on to that only hurts you. You think it's hurting the other person, but you are literally only hurting yourself, and you are crippling yourself.
Yeah, that's so funny. On the back of this sweatshirt, and it's funny that I wore this sweatshirt, the back of the sweatshirt says, holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's exactly what it was. And the piece that for me, like where I started to experience forgiveness, was someone said to me, they were like, what if your parents didn't know what they were doing? And if they did, they wouldn't have done it. And I was like, oh my God. And, you know, people said that to me, like, there's rape in my story. There's like, tumultuous friendships and relationships and whatever. And when someone said that statement to me, it was like really freeing, because it was like, yeah, like, this isn't about me, right? Like, I took everything as like, this is about me and you're trying to affect me. And it's like, so there's so much like pride and ego in that. But to be able to release that stuff of like, hey, we're all just like walking each other home, right? Like, we're all just like walking each other to home. And by home, I mean like the end of our life, whatever. And it's like, nobody's given this like roadmap of like, this is how you're supposed to act. And nobody gets to like see the future of like, this is exactly what your life is going to look like. It's like, hey, we deal with the stuff that is like right in front of us with the tools that we have in that moment. Like,
yeah,
I always say this of like, there's things that I probably like think, say, and believe today that 3 years from now I'm gonna be like, oh my God, I can't believe I thought that.
Yeah.
And then there's stuff that I'm gonna be like, wow, thank goodness I had that experience then, because now that's helping me carry into like today. And for me, it's like, I look and think about that in this way of like forgiveness. Like, I grew up going to like private Catholic schools my whole life, like liturgical music every Thursday. Like, we were Creasters, so we went to like Christmas and Easter mass to like show up, you know, but like there was never any like spirituality or like actual like God, higher power, divine order, like whatever you want to call it. Like, there was no external experience. Like, I could only function from like inside of me and like what was going on with me. And when I got sober, I got to have that experience of like believing in like a higher power and a spirit of the universe and God and all of that stuff again. And I feel like that was where forgiveness was able to like come into my heart, and I was able to just like love other people, because I thought that like love was always like conditional, right? Like, I love you, but like, I love you, but I want you to do this, or I love you, but I think you should do this, or, you know, whatever. And to like experience forgiveness and be like, I can just love you like unconditionally, completely detached. Like, you get to be exactly as you are, and I'm going to love you no matter what. Like, maybe that means I see you all the time. Maybe that means I like see you every once in a while. Maybe it means we like talk on the phone every week or whatever. Like, it really, having forgiveness and having sobriety all at the same time and like getting both of those gifts really made me understand relationships in a new way, that they weren't always like give and get. Because that was what I always thought was like, you know, my parents give me this, so now I need, right? Like, my parents gave me this great education, so now I need to make them proud, and I need to like achieve all this stuff for them to love me. Like, there was like weird conditions, and when that kind of started to evaporate, that was when I was like, oh, I actually like get to have friendships with people. Like, I get to be in good relationship with my sister and like and my cousins and whatever, and we get to like actually have a relationship with depth and weight. Whereas like that stuff, those like friendships that you and I were kind of talking about earlier with like the pre-sobriety stuff, like, you couldn't get there with those relationships. Like, you just can't. There's a block. And that's the stuff that was like really hard to deal with as I kind of like pushed forward, is like letting go of the stuff where it's like, hey, this is not going to like serve your future self. But I feel like that's like a total tangent that I just went on.
No, every
but it was
single
like
thing you said.
But like, that was the thing, was like, I just like held my parents in like so much like hate and fear and anger and whatever, and to like go the opposite way of like, I totally like, I get it, because I can now look at myself and be like, at some of the relationships that I had and some of the ways that I like treated people, like, I had no idea what I was doing. If I did, I wouldn't have done it. And like, I'll know more in the future. And that's, I guess that's it. Like, that's the message.
Exactly. And even some of the things you said, I mean, you were the victim. Like, God, you actually had things happen to you where you were a victim, but to not stay the victim. And that's something I said yesterday on with Rachel, was that no matter what happens to me, even if you are classified as a victim in a certain case, I will never stay someone's victim. I will never give someone that power. And that's something that is amazing, especially when it's on a super extreme case where something did happen to you, but you're not allowing that to stay with you. It happened to you once or whatever. It is in the past, and that's not living on in your future. Because I even just saw something yesterday where someone said, if you talk to any alcoholic long enough in active alcoholism, you will realize they live in their past. And that was always me when I was in my drinking. I was always still dealing with everything. And then when you're drinking, more and more is happening to you. So it's never going to go away.
Right.
You're always going to be the victim. And then when you get to the other side, you can release all of that and move on accordingly. You can make your proper boundaries. You can forgive the people that deserve forgiveness. And then obviously in certain cases that does not apply, but you can actually face head on everything that you need to face. And I think that that's so amazing. And even I realized maybe a year into sobriety, when I still was not really at my forgiveness journey, that started happening around that time, that I felt like there were a lot of people. Obviously, I had my friends that I really, really loved. But other than that, I had a lot of people that I got along with them really well, and I would have a conversation with them. But then, like, I didn't really like that many people all too much. Like, if you were different than me or different opinions, like, I didn't really like you that much. And when you actually go through that forgiveness journey and start realizing how amazing people are, I love so many people. So many people. Even if you are extremely different than me, have totally different views than me, like, I love people like that. And I love people across the country that I haven't spoken to in 5 years. And I just hold so much love for so many people. And I think so many people are so beautiful. And that's something that I did not feel before. I did not feel anything like that before.
Do you feel like, I have a question
Yes.
based off of that. Do you feel like the reason that you had that shift of like perspective is because you kind of got to this place where like, I feel like every person can teach me something and I can grow because of like my relationship and my experience with them? Like, I would be interested to hear like where you kind of feel like that shift happened.
I feel like honestly loving myself.
Yeah.
And finding out who I was and being comfortable with myself, because it's all at the end of the day projection. Before, I was not comfortable with myself. So how could I like you?
Yeah.
Like, how could I think what you're doing is cool? How could I think anything when I don't even know who the heck I am and I don't love myself?
Yeah.
And I feel like it was a mixture of that forgiveness journey and then also being comfortable with myself, because it took a long time into sobriety to fully being comfortable with myself. And I say it all the time and I'll say it again, it was faking it till I make it, and eventually it does start to become real.
Yeah.
And then that's a shift I never really thought, kind of like you said, when you thought everyone was faking it and all of that. I used to think that too. And then even when I started to be confident and be sure of myself and all of that, that was like a faking it process.
Oh, yeah.
And I thought it would get better. Like, I was like, I think I'll get stronger with this and better at this, but I didn't think it would ever truly be 100% authentic where it is today.
Yeah. And I feel like with that too, there's like that piece of like faking it where you're like, okay, like I'm going to tell myself like, I believe that like I am on a path that is like calling me to a higher purpose. I believe that I'm beautiful. I love my body. Like all of that stuff. Like I was saying that stuff, but then when you have the experience of like, oh, I need to take action in this, right? Like I don't get to just like say this stuff and by process of osmosis, like me saying it and me being around other people who believe it, like it's gonna happen. It was like, okay, I needed to like take those tiny little steps towards like removing jealousy, removing envy, removing like fear and just like lack of confidence. Like I needed to do the little tiny things that were like say cute little like sayings and have cute little like post-it notes around my house and whatever. But then I had to like actively like move in the direction of like when those thoughts came in, I was taking action, whether it was like writing it down, calling other people and kind of like telling on myself, or like seeking a different solution of like, hey, this stuff is coming up for me and I don't know what to do next. And I feel like that's why it's super useful to have so many people in your network when you get sober, or like whether you're like getting sober from like alcohol or drugs, or whether it's like eating disorder stuff or just like trying to come out of like depression and anxiety or whatever. It's like so important to have people around you because they can continue to just like feed you new ideas of like, hey, try to take this action, maybe go to this place, maybe do this thing. And that's like super fundamental in the way that like I got sober, was like people were just like throwing me little ideas all the time, and I was so broken that I was like, maybe this will work, like I'll take that band-aid, and eventually I didn't actually need any of the band-aids. Like the thing just healed.
Yeah.
And that was like what is so important to me today when I think about like sobriety and just like the network of people I've built my life around.
Yeah. And you brought up some things there. I know you've had an interesting eating journey, as have I. So I would love to know more about that and what that looked like for you and the changes you implemented that you felt like helped you.
Yeah. I feel like it's always a journey, like with just like health and fitness and wellness, and especially like nowadays there's like so many wellness like trends and all of that stuff, and it's like so quick, like just us as like a culture and society, we're so quick to attach to like, this is the next new thing, this is the next best thing and whatever. And I was totally that way. I mean, I had like this eating, and it took me probably like a year and a half into sobriety was when I finally was willing to admit like, hey, I have like an eating disorder problem as well, because like I didn't look like I had an eating disorder. Like that's the way that I would like describe it, is like I didn't look that way. Like I was eating, and I wasn't like teeny tiny, you know, like the classic like picture of like of an eating disorder. Like I wasn't that. But like the way that I talk about it today is like I was constantly thinking about it. Yeah. Constantly. Like
That'll
it was
do it.
constantly, you know, it's just like drugs and alcohol and
Yeah.
it's like all of that stuff. And I was like constantly thinking about like, what do my arms look like? Right. And then I'm like judging that person and like the way that they look because I'm judging myself. And it was just like an absolute mess and disaster. And, you know, like when I was in my addiction, like I literally have photos of like balanced breakfast, and it was like me chugging cold brew, taking an Adderall, and like literally I think taking a laxative, like so I just like wouldn't like I don't know, right? I don't even know what I was trying to do, but in my like delusional head, like that was what was gonna work because like, okay, I'm gonna drink coffee, that's gonna like jumpstart my metabolism, and then I'm gonna like take this Adderall and I'm not gonna eat, and I'm gonna like burn all this energy by going on a giant run, and then I'm gonna like take that. So I don't even know what the goal of that was, but like chaos, like absolute chaos. And I look back now and I'm like, first of all, I thought that I like looked good and healthy, and I'm like, I probably almost look like pretty close to this. I don't look the same. I was way more inflamed and bloated then, but I'm like, there wasn't this like crazy fluctuation in my body, but my mind was telling me that there was. And like that was the piece where there was like so much insanity. And then I know like kind of what you're getting at is like this piece where I would attach to all those trends. Like, okay, now I'm literally at one point I would be like, I'm paleo pescatarian. Like, what the fuck does that even mean?
What is that?
What is that? And it was just like craziness, and all it was so I could be like super picky, so I could like do the things that I deemed as healthy or that somebody else deemed as healthy. Therefore I was like, this is Bible, and I'm gonna like live my life by that. And so I had like been vegan for a time in high school, and then because my sister was like, I was totally like that, like my sister went vegan and I was like, well, I'm gonna go vegan, like that sounds fun. And then I did that for a while, and then I think like when I was in college, my freshman year roommate like actually had celiac, so I was like kind of gluten-free by default, which was like totally fine and great. And I wasn't really like thinking about my body that much at those times, so it was like totally fine for me to be like mixing and matching those like food trends or ideas or whatever. But then it got to a point where it was like such an obsession and compulsion, and I was like, I have to do these things to like manipulate and change my body so people like me. And that was like where the real pain and the chaos started. And so I, you know, thought the answer was like fake meat and like, you know, like all the like Beyond, we were all talking about this last night, like Beyond Burgers and Impossible Burgers and like fake food and whatever, because like, you know, fake food, it's fine. And so I was really hyper focused on like dairy free, gluten free, grain free, you know, like carbs are bad. Like God forbid I like touched a sandwich or a bagel or whatever. But then there would be this point where I would like then go like binge eat a bunch of sticky buns. And I'm like, and now I'm like back in this crazy cycle. And so when I got sober, I was like, I don't think I like knew what the next step was going to be with my eating journey. Like I didn't have a plan. I definitely in the back of my head was like, well, now that I'm sober, I'm going to be so skinny. And God. It's like, oh my God, that is so far off base. Like that is not what it's about. But I think that paints a picture of like how deep I was in some stuff that you wouldn't have even known. And so literally it was like a month after I got sober, so I was probably like 45 to 50 days sober. I was living in a new apartment in Minnesota, and I got the Medical Medium recipe book, which is just like vegetables and fruit, and it's like a very regimented diet of a bunch of like fruits and vegetables. And it's kind of like he's the one who invented celery juice, so it's like kind of this like cure-all whatever. And I definitely credit that for propelling me into the eating journey that I'm in today, because it was like the first time that I was really nourishing my body with like healthy foods for the first time in probably like 3 to 5 years. Like I had not been eating like whole foods consistently, and so that was the first time, because I did it for like I did the full 30 like for 30 days, and then I kind of did this like floundering thing for the following 30 days, and then just kind of implemented it in my life. And then now over the course of like the last 2.5 years, like today I drink like whole milk like pretty much every day, and I'm always eating meat. Like I always have meat, I always have vegetables. I like start my day with a raw carrot salad because I like used to have horrible acne that was like hormonal induced, but also like drinking induced. But so today there's like this weird thing I found. You saw it. I found a note from 2019 where I was like, I want to be lactose free and gluten free, and I was like, oh my god,
it was like everything free.
It was like everything free of everything. But the truth of the matter, right, that in 2019, like I just want to be free, and I thought that all of these other external solutions would be the things to fix it, and it just like didn't happen. And so today I'm like, yeah, I drink like raw milk, I eat pizza, I love sourdough, I have like breakfast burritos all the time, and I'm like so grateful. You know, for me it was really easy to move through all of that stuff because my sister is a doctor of traditional Chinese medicine, so she's like brilliant and super gifted and understands the body and nutrition in a way that is like whole. And so she has been like my saving grace through all of that, and has let me just like experience my own journey. But it has been like one of those things of just learning like, hey, what works for you might not work for me. And what works for me, like I literally can't have seed oils at all. Like sunflower seeds, I will be like curled up in a ball in the corner if there's like sunflower oil in anything that I have, and that works for me. Like to remove that, I instantly felt better. But it's like, I don't know anything about your body. Like I don't know what your lifestyle is like. What works for me might not work for you.
Exactly.
But like I encourage you to go explore that and see what happens. And that's like everything, right? Like I don't know if sobriety is the answer for you. I know it's the answer for me. And if you want help, like I'll be here.
Yes.
And same with like eating stuff, and right, like all of it, it's like, hey, I'll be here as a resource if you decide that that's what you want for your life. And I had to get that way with everything when it came to like my body and eating, is like, hey, all of this stuff is here, all of it, like gluten-free, you know, Beyond Burgers. If one day I decide that I want to eat Beyond Burgers again, I'm gonna go eat it because like maybe that'll work for me. But like today it's like steak and sushi and pasta and whole milk and all of this stuff. I'm like on a journey for raw milk right now. Like that's what I really want. But it's like I stopped being like, I want this for me because it'll be better for you. Like, you know, like today I like to work out and lift and all of this stuff, and before it was like, I can't do that because I'll get bulky and like this and that, because like people said like, oh well, what if you look like a boy and you start like lifting? And so then I'm like terrified of that. And it's like, why don't you just like do the things that make you like feel good and have fun? Like it's all about having fun. I'm like, eating's supposed to be fun, working out is supposed to be fun. And it was like so painful before, and today it's like fun. And so that's my like long-winded journey of like, I was super restricted, and today I'm like so free to do whatever I choose. And that's like not just about eating, it's about everything.
It's about everything. And yeah, you would think you would just do what feels good, but it feels like in society certain diets are pushed, and like exactly what you're saying, different things work for different people. I have friends that are vegan that absolutely love it and swear by it. Great. For me, that food makes me feel horrible. I like to eat a lot of meat, and pastas. For a while when I was restricting and I was anorexic, I was trying to eat 0 carbs. Like I literally tried to make the number of carbs, because carbs are in things that aren't even traditional carbs like bread and stuff. I would literally try to have as close to 0 as possible for a very long time. And like my only carbs for definitely about a year, maybe more, my freshman year in college, when you're supposed to be learning, you're supposed to have full brain function, I would have dried fruit in the morning, and that was my only source of carbs. And I remember when I finally got into treatment, the nutritionist telling me like carbs are literally what makes your brain function.
Yeah.
Your brain does not function without carbs. And then it's like, okay, that makes sense.
you're like, oh, no wonder I'm like dying.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then even with like when I went, and I talked about this with Christine when we talked about eating disorders. When I went into recovery with eating disorders, it was so tough because there was such a long, tumultuous journey with it where I had to figure out what worked for me. Because again, like with alcohol, you can just not drink alcohol, but with food, you can't just not eat. So you have to figure out what works for you. And it took me a very, very, very long time. I tried just about everything. Today, I will never do any kind of diet. I will never do this free, that free, anything free. Yeah. Because it just simply did not work for me. It did not work for me, and it did way more damage. And I did feel like I was still in a point where I would try not to have certain things, then I would binge on it or have too much of it, then I would feel sick. And I was eating things that just constantly did not make me feel good. And I was like, oh, I guess this is just like what eating is. And I was super inflamed. I was not comfortable. I didn't feel like how I expect it to feel in recovery. And it was because I wasn't doing what actually worked for me. And when I just started to intuitively eat and give my body what it was asking for, if I wanted a steak or a burger because I was craving iron, then I would eat that. And if I wanted a cupcake, I wouldn't restrict myself, so then I wouldn't have 5 tomorrow. Yeah. Then I started to actually feel amazing and do the exact exercise that I'm feeling. Like, I'm always going to be an extreme exerciser. I love it. Like, that is what makes me tick. That is what I live for. And being able to fuel myself properly for that and do it for the proper reasons, like, I feel amazing today. And I didn't even feel amazing last year. And I'm 4 years into it. And I think just realizing, like, I'm just love being active. Like, I walk home from work, I walk everywhere. That's something that was missing. Like, I just love being outside and being active. And I know for a fact I wouldn't be able to do the things I do if I was not fueling myself properly. And if I didn't figure out how to make myself feel good. And it's not always a perfect path. Still today, I will have something just because it's near me. Like, it'll be in the office or it'll be just the only option, and it's something that I know will make me feel sick, and I'll still eat it. I'm a human being. And then I feel horrible and I'm like, why will I do this? And then I'll do it again the next day and then I'll stop. Because sometimes you just need to, honestly, sometimes you need to remember, okay, that makes me feel horrible. I cannot eat that. Yeah. But I will never be at the point again where I'm restricting myself from anything. And then you even told me, you got me on, I knew nothing about this seed oil stuff, because I was telling you certain vegetables make me feel horrible, where I can't eat like 4 to 5 different vegetables. And you said they were probably just cooked in seed oil.
Yeah, because that was my question to you, is I was like, well, is it when you're making those foods at home? And you were like, no, it's when I'm going out. And I was like, oh, I get that. I've been there. Because I had my list of like 4 to 5 vegetables that I was like, I can't eat any of these things. You know, it was like mushrooms, broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, whatever. Like, I was like, I can't eat any of this stuff. It like makes my stomach hurt so bad. And what I ended up finding out through this like journey of health was that all of that stuff, when I'm eating it at a restaurant, is cooked in seed oils and like canola oil, like all these things that are like super inflammatory, and when they're like heated up at high levels, they just like really harm your body. And so when I started making that stuff at home, like at first, and I like tell people this too, it's like it was a gradual journey. Like, I had to literally make some of these vegetables with like water for a while. Like, I was cooking with water because everything was upsetting my stomach, like no matter what it was. But like realizing like what restaurants are actually doing when I'm going out to eat, like it is not good food. Like, I would be like, oh, I'm like going to this super healthy restaurant, whatever. And it's like, hey, they're like caking this stuff in sunflower oil. No wonder I like feel so sick afterwards. And it was just like learning through that. And then I think also this piece that I'm still starting to understand it and whatever, but like how impacted females who have hormone, like their long hormone cycles, you know, like men have like a 24-hour like hormone cycle. They just like wake up the next day and they're like, everything's great. And I'm like, women are on this like long, like, I don't know, what is it, like 30, is it a 30-day cycle? I don't actually know. I'm like just learning about all this, but like the whole piece of like, I'm on a long hormone cycle. Like sometimes I need more food, sometimes I need more carbs, sometimes I need more sugar, like whatever. And for me, like what I found where my like cortisol spikes were and where I would like really experience most hormonal acne was when I would wait to eat. Like if I would do intermittent fasting, like I was really struggling. Like it was really hard for me to function day to day. It just like didn't work for me. And so now I have this rule of like I eat 45 to 75 minutes after I wake up, like no matter what. Like I am eating before I leave the house, before I go to the gym. Like I had a trainer who was finally like, you know, I was terrible at workouts, and he's like, what is going on? He's like, are you eating before you come here? And I was like, no. He's like, what? He's like, that you have to eat, like your body needs to be like fueled. And I was like, oh, I like didn't think about that. And when I finally got the experience of like eating before I left the house, like my body like started to change immediately, right? My skin looks better, my hair's stronger, I like don't have that like weird bloating thing that everybody always talks about. I don't have the 3 p.m. fog. It's like because I kick in right away and I just get to like start moving through life. But like it was a journey, like what you said. It took a long time to get to intuitively knowing when my body needs to be fueled. And I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on this, because I just like believe, again, I believe this for myself, I don't know if it's true for other people, but I had this journey of like when I was super separated from a solution, like I needed a spiritual solution to intuitively know when I was supposed to eat. Like when it was just like me and my brain, like I was calculating like this is when I should eat, and I would call that intuitive eating. Today I'm like, hey, I like wake up and I do prayer and meditation in the morning, so I'm like pretty balanced and even, you know, by the time I get to my kitchen. And so I know what's going on with my body. Like I'm not like thinking about dinner that I had last night or what I'm gonna eat for lunch today and if I'm gonna work out. And then I would like base my eating off of that, and I would call that intuitive eating. I'm like, that's actually just like control and manipulation is really what it is. But today when I get to like lead with an awareness, then I'm not thinking about it, right? The hamster wheel stops, and it's just like, oh, I can kind of like feel that feeling in my stomach. I should probably have some fruit or have a burrito or have like what, you know, whatever it is. I'm going to drink some tea instead of coffee or whatever. And I get to have like that kind of like free path. And so I just think it's interesting to hear like other people's experiences with that, because it's like, if I wasn't in neutral, how was I supposed to know when I was supposed to eat or what I was supposed to eat? Like it was just wild.
For me, I feel like I try to have bigger meals. I don't really snack. I normally have about 2 large meals a day, and then like a dessert. Honestly,
dessert
I'm a really big sweet tooth person, but I'll never have, I don't have like pretzels, chips, like I just don't eat snacks. I've never really like, I would rather have a piece of like white chocolate. Really weird. I don't like chocolate out of nowhere, and I think it's from my eating disorder days. I would generally binge on peanut butter and honey when I was anorexic, and then when I kind of was like, okay, now I'm gonna have some desserts, then I was binging on chocolate and a lot peanut butter. So I hate chocolate and peanut butter today.
Interesting.
Like it repulses me. Like even if I had it, I hate it. So I love white chocolate and like fruity flavors and stuff like that. So I would rather have like a piece of white chocolate as a snack, or a cookie or something like that, a smoothie, latte, and then have my main meals, because I just try to eat things now that I know are going to fill me. And then it also goes off of exactly what you were saying. As a woman, you have a monthly cycle, and at different points in the month there's different things that you crave. So I might be craving steak for a week, and then I might be wanting a little bit more sugar. And I really just try to listen to my body. And that's something I didn't even know was possible because exactly, like, there was just too much thinking. There was too much. It was just like running a mile a minute trying to find the solution for this thing that's already inside of us. Like, we already should know this, but when there's such a large disconnect, you can't listen to your body. And when your brain is literally running a mile a minute and not even giving you a chance to breathe, you cannot listen to what you actually need.
Yeah, and you're like taking other people's feedback and ideas as like the truth.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I'm like, everybody else's opinion is fact, instead of like getting to like, hey, what is like the central core of my existence? Like, what is true for my life? And like, what is that? And that's like, that's a journey to figure out. Like, it's a painful, raw, like, journey that you end up having to, like, for me, I had to disregard literally everything. Like, it was, I say it all the time, of like, nothing major, but change everything. Like, that was the foundation of sobriety for me, was like, it, like, no big deal, but like literally everything changed.
Yeah. And something else that shifts is what stuck out to me earlier, you said about comparison. When I was literally a bone, I would still be comparing myself to every single person and looking at what they eat, looking at what they do, like, you're just like at all times. And now today, I'm like, there's people way heavier than me. I was trying to think of the word, curvy or thick or whatever, that look amazing. And there's people lighter than me that look amazing. There's people of every that look amazing and feel amazing and are healthy. And people have different resting points that are healthy for them, as long as it is truly healthy. It's not about the weight or the number on the scale. It's about if they feel good and if they're healthy. And then you don't care what someone else is eating. That always affected me so much, going out to dinner. Like, oh, well, she didn't take another pierogi, so I can't have another pierogi. Like, no, I don't care what anyone else is eating. I'm eating what I feel like eating now. And that's something that I always really, really struggled with. And that is just completely lifted when you actually figure out what's going on inside your body and what's going on inside of your brain.
Yeah, that's like so funny. As you were saying that, I was thinking about like our dinner last night with like the 5 girls, and like, you know, whatever, we're all just like ordering to share. I'm like, those situations used to give me so much anxiety. And it was like I was terrified to be in those situations. I would like look at the menu before we would go to dinner to like pre-plan in my head like what I was gonna order, so I could like know, right? So then people wouldn't like judge me and whatever. And you know what I come to find out is nobody was judging me either way, whether I was gonna order the burger or the soup or the salad. You know, it didn't matter. But the reason I thought that is because like I'm judging you, right? Like, I'm sure I'm like probably taking a quote from like the Bible or something right now, but that piece of like judge and be judged, right? Like, if I judge other people, what do I expect? Like, and I always thought that judge and be judged meant like, I'm going to judge you, therefore you're going to judge me, like, right? Eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. But what it actually means for me today is like, I'm going to judge you and then I'm going to judge myself.
Yes.
And that's the cycle that I'm going to be stuck in until it kills me. And it didn't have to like organically kill me. It was just like, for a really long time, it was just like me living a life completely asleep, completely like unaware of how I was impacting other people, how I was showing up, how I was like hurting people. Like, when I got to a point of like, oh wow, like the way that I'm showing up in this world, like I'm trying to dress it up that it's like really nice and I'm thinking about others, but the reality is like I'm like really hurting other people. Like I'm really stopping them from being able to explore other relationships that would be better for them. And like when I found that stuff out through like sobriety and eating disorder things, I was like, oh man, oh man, I am in like much more trouble than I thought I was.
Yeah. And it's so nice too to just quiet all those voices. Think about just in the past 30 minutes how many things we said were going on in our head, and all of that was happening at one time. Like, it's just so much more peaceful to make it to the other side. And nowadays, if someone is judging what I eat, like, you just know, like, I'm sorry that you're going through that. I'm sorry that you are still in that place, and you just have a different perspective. And then looping back even to the beginning when you said about not judging our parents or different people that hurt us, because guess what? I hurt a lot of people in my active addiction and my active eating disorder, and I negatively affected a lot of people, and I know that for a fact, and it hurts. And to be able to forgive myself for that is really tough. But to have the self-awareness now where I know I'm not going to do that moving forward, and at least we stopped it sooner than later, and now know that. But just looping it all together is that if someone is still in that space that they are judging or acting out or anything like that, like, I honestly just hope that they can get past that rather than hold contempt towards them. And sometimes it's really, really hard, but you just have to hope that everyone finds what we were able to find. And again, everything's different for everyone. The solution might look different, but those are not qualities that you want to pass through life with, because it can be shifted. Because we're living proof that we did shift it, and it feels a lot better today, because I had so much fun at that dinner too, and group dinners were a disaster. Disaster as far as alcohol, disaster as far as eating, everything, just disastrous before. So it just really changes your life in a way that is unbelievable to someone who has never experienced that.
Yeah, like there's so much relief in that. And I feel like when I think about people who are still in that, and I was in that for so long, and like what we were talking about earlier, and like forgiveness and just like loving people, is like the message to people who are like stuck in that stuff is like, there are so many people who love you that you don't know yet. And you'll get to meet all of them, and you'll get to experience all of them. And then in turn you get to be that message for other people. And like, I recently read a quote, and I don't know like why it just is like so heavy in this like beautiful way on my heart, but it's like, we're all an answer to someone's prayers. And it's like, wow, that was how I felt when I got sober, is there were so many people that I look back today and I'm like, answer to my prayers, answer to my prayers, answer to my prayers, like, for sure. Because like, I was praying to die, and I got a ton of sober people instead. And I was like, okay, cool. Like, I wouldn't have thought that was, I was praying for the answer that I thought was death. And then instead it was just like people and connection and community and action, like a lot of action.
That's crazy too, because I would literally pray to die, because I did not want to do it myself, because I didn't want to hurt the people in my life. But that's literally something I would pray for, and I would be like, God, I don't even know if you're real, but blah blah blah. Yeah,
but like, kill me in my sleep. And then I'd wake up the next day and I'd be like, oh God isn't real. I'm still alive.
Horrible.
I know, like, I can laugh at it today because it's not true, but like, when you're in it, it's like very real. Like, I'm sure you had the nights where you're like in bed, like literally begging to die.
And I make light of it now, and I make a joke about everything, because I think that's a coping mechanism, and I make light of it all. So apologies if it offends anyone.
I feel like
that's just who I am. Like, that, I think that makes everyone more comfortable with it, and it's a coping mechanism for myself. And it does make people, because this stuff is really friggin' heavy, and it makes a lot of people uncomfortable. And I think that's something that kind of loops people in. Like, I'll joke with people like, oh, my trip to the hab, like, it makes people feel less uncomfortable about it. Lets people know that, like, I don't feel uncomfortable about this.
Yeah.
So just wanted to slide that in there.
Yeah.
But I truly believe with the higher power stuff, like, you do get what you need and not what you want.
Yeah.
Because I know for a fact if I got anything I wanted when I wanted it, I would not be the person who I am today. I mean, looking back at all the little prayers I said my whole life, if any of my prayers were answered when I wanted them and not when I needed them, I would not be who I am, because everything has sculpted me into who I am. And I truly believe in this connectivity where, like, somehow we were connected and we were supposed to be in each other's story.
Totally.
And this is not the first or second or third time I've experienced this, where I had this weird surface level friendship with someone and then they just kept, like, reappearing, and then, like, you have this super deep connection and you're like, I had no idea you were experiencing that and I was experiencing that at the same time. And it's like, it's almost freaky. It's like some higher self or higher power knows to gravitate towards someone.
Yeah.
And it's crazy, but it's beautiful, and that's life.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm like so in that. I'm like very woo woo in that. I like tell people that all the time. Like, I'm like woo woo and like a lot of that stuff, right? Like, I have like God and higher power and like spirit of the universe and like energy and all of that stuff. But I'm like, it's so true, because we're all like, you get magnetized to the people that you need, like, not the people that you want, right? Like, I thought I wanted like these relationships and these like partners and whatever, and it's like, no, I end up getting pushed and propelled in the direction of the people that I'm like actually being called to, that can be helpful to me, that I can be helpful to. And like, that's that's real purpose. And like, it all totally pans out and plays out. And I know we were talking about this of like the needs versus wants, and it's like all the stuff that I wanted, like, and thought that I needed, like, I eventually got like all of it. Like, today I'm like, yeah, like that, you saw that list from like 2019. I'm sure I have some from like 2015 when I graduated like high school and all this stuff. Like, I have all these lists of like things that I needed and wanted out of life. And it's like, how I look at those lists today is like, whether I have all of that stuff or not today, I do have it, because I have the gift of life, and I have a life that is unbelievably filled with like so much joy and so much love and passion and purpose and people. Like, that's all I needed. That's what, when I look at those little lists, where whether it's like, you know, be a CrossFit athlete, be a CEO, like own my own business, or like be dairy free, like whatever, those were all just like me like searching for some level of like connection to other people or something else, or just like to myself. And like, I've gotten all of that today. Like, I have all of that stuff today, whether I have it or not. I have it because I'm in absolute freedom and community. And like, that's the gift of sobriety, and like turning your life over to something other than serving just yourself.
Yeah. And that's something like 15-year-old me knew I could do something impactful and powerful, and knew that was inside of me. 16-year-old me would be like, certainly not this.
16-year-old and like, who?
17, 18, 19, 20, 21 would be like, you're not even making it.
Yeah.
So to sit here and have these gifts and you never really know where you're going to end up. Yeah. But you do need to take some control, where exactly what you were saying, you need to take action to make things happen, but you never really actually know the journey you're about to be on.
Yeah, like, you don't know what it's going to do. Like, I'm going to take this action and then like, we'll see what happens.
You might be on the couch in New York City from Minnesota.
Like, here we are. Who would have thought?
But thank you so much again for coming and for getting real, very real today.
Thank you.
And I'm just so glad that you were able to go on this journey and
thanks for being
then
part of it.
Eventually come on and do this. Absolutely amazing. Thank you, Brooklyn.
Yeah, it's a real gift. Thank you, Maddie.
Of course, we got real. Thanks for tuning in and getting real with us. Podcasts will be posted every other Wednesday on Spotify and YouTube. Please reach out via DM if you want to chat.